Welcome to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety, where we talk about the real issues out on the road, focus on safe driving, and learn industry best practices from your hosts Kenny Ray, Mike Bohan, Jim Seibert, and Barry Harrison, and the hopes that by driving the line, we get more drivers home safe and sound. This podcast is made possible by Marsh McLennan Agency.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Driving the Line, the podcast that's always in the pursuit of safety. I am Jim Seibert. I am joined by Mr. Kenny Ray, Mr. Mike Bohan, and Mr. Barry Harrison. Thank you guys for being here today. Another good discussion I hope we have. And we are coming off Cloud 9, such a great last podcast, episode 55, talking about distracted driving. We got another thing coming up here in the month of April, and guys, I'm going to let you guess what it is purely by sharing the slogan for 2025. Respect the zone so we all get home. What do you guys think I'm talking about?
That sounds like work zone awareness.
Yes, sir.
That's the only zones I'm familiar with.
Yeah, National Work Zone Awareness Week is April 21st through 25th, and they got a pretty good program this year. They going to cover things. They give you a daily agenda, work zone safety training. They got a national kickoff event, Go Orange Day, storming social media with posts about work zone awareness. And then on the 25th, they're going to take a moment of silence to remember the men and women whose lives were lost in work zone incidents. Kenny, kind of talking in preparation for this, you shared that when you were growing up, and I don't really remember this, but you shared growing up that these used to be known as construction zones.
Yeah, and Jim, that's actually what would be on the orange or the yellow signs is as you were going down the highway and you came to a place where they were either repaving the road or building a new road or fixing a guardrail or some damage to the highway, it would say construction zone ahead or construction zone slow. And then at some point, the nomenclature, the name changed. And I think it's profound that it did, because now it's called a work zone. When you think of the word construction, you think about somebody building something. But, you know, now they're advertising to the world, this is our workplace. You're driving into my workplace. And if you think about that from kind of a philosophical standpoint, you know, it's a pretty profound change, and I think a very significant one, and I think an appropriate one to designate what that area is really and truly. It's where somebody's working. And we're driving, for those of us that drive passenger, I mean, we're driving a 4,500 pound automobile through, and for our listening audience, they're driving an 80,000 pound truck through somebody's workplace.
It's more all-inclusive to what's going on the roads, because every time you see a work zone, it's not just the state department out there, you know, repaving, you know, a contractor that's constructing a road. There's a lot of different types of work that's happening out there on the road, and we see it every day. So it's, you know, like here in Missouri, if MoDOT's out there, they've got their work zones that they set up when they're working on the road and things like that. But, you know, I'd shared this with you guys that there's third-party contractors that come out and have work zones set up. And I see it a lot on I-70, because in Missouri on I-70, we've got those cable barriers. The lanes are relatively close together. But they set up the cable barriers to prevent vehicles, when they lose control, from going in oncoming lanes. And when those get hit, somebody has to go back out and reset the post and get the cables connected back to them. Well, those are third-party contractors, so they've got their own work zones. So there's a lot more folks out there than just people that are physically constructing either a new road or redoing an existing road. There's a lot of different folks out there.
Yeah, Kenny, when you had shared that previous to this recording, the difference between construction, what it used to be, and now work zones, I did what I normally do, and I started over analyzing. I got real into Barry's profession, the psychological warfare, and thinking, construction, when I'm driving through construction zones, my mind is thinking I'm in a city, right? And they put all these orange barriers out and they push those chain link fences, and it really restricts and condenses me to where I've got to slow down. I don't want to bump a barrier, and there's other vehicles, there's parallel parking. It it almost seemed counterintuitive to change the name from construction zone to work zone. But from just what you guys said, the work zone, I think of my work zone. All right, I'm either standing at a podium, I'm crawling through a grain elevator, I'm doing audits. Imagine vehicles flying by me. And in the ag world, that is a real concern, right? We've got many people that have started to require high visibility clothing for their people that work there, because in the ag industry, there is many pieces of mobile equipment. Powered industrial trucks, that's something I teach on all the time. Well, where I'm walking is my work zone, and getting struck by or caught between these mobile pieces of equipment and a fixed object is a real hazard. And so I like the change because, yes, there's multiple work zones by multiple companies that are happening. Mike, your example there is pretty spot on Highway 64 here, just east of Morrison, Oklahoma. It's where Highway 64 and the 412 Turnpike intersect. They have been working on that stinking overpass and the on-ramps and the off-ramps, and this is all a part of changing our tolling system. But they've been working on that for over 3 years. And now all the barriers are gone. All the big time construction, all the cement guys, all the heavy equipment's gone. But just the other day, I drove into Morrison, probably for some kid's school function, and there are vehicles parked all over with their red and blue lights flashing, and they're not law enforcement. They've got people out there rolling grass out now. Probably part of a SWIP plan, closing the SWIP plan out by reestablishing the grass in the area where they did so much disruption. But there was people walking back and forth across the highway. And when I think of those work zones and seeing that example and just listening to you guys talk, it all kind of comes together that it makes it a little bit more personal in the term of work zone of people than a construction zone, where many would just say, well, hey, they're sitting in a crane or a big heavy piece of mobile equipment. I can keep going 80 through here. Good points there to be made. I just wanted to highlight here, we've got the National Work Zone Awareness Week.org. If this is something that your company wants to be a part of, they got an excellent website with loads of information and how to take part in it. This is an American Traffic Safety Services Association. This is a branch off of that, to where they're continuing to expand work zone safety awareness. And also that National Work Zone Safety .org, they put a lot of other materials out there. So there are 3 separate sites that you can go to if you want your company to take part in this week, April 21st through April 25th. Just reading through their website, I came upon a term that I had not been familiar with. And Barry, I think that you may have something to add to this, but they have a training called defensive flagging.
Jim, I am very familiar. Coming from the pipeline industry, for the listeners that don't know, I worked pipeline construction for roughly 6 years, and at one time I held certifications in multiple states for flagging. And for somebody that may not know or be familiar with flagging, in my definition, is when you're you see them all the time. You're driving down the road, down the highway, and it'll be a guy or a gal out there, and they're literally holding a stop sign on one side and then a slow sign on the other. And I've got several stories. I want to just share a couple today with our listeners, and I think it's a good exercise to give the perspective of, because Jim, you did an excellent job of opening this up and talking about, these are these people's offices. And so the first story I'll share with you guys, we were working in Ohio at the time, and to tie into it's not a construction zone necessarily. What you'll see, it's a series of signs as you come up, especially to pipeline construction. And the first one will say utility work ahead, or it will specify pipeline construction ahead. And then you'll see another one a little ways down the road that says flagger ahead. And then you'll see the flagger. So again, we're working in Ohio. We're by a very busy distribution center. And we literally, on both sides, it kind of comes down to a valley where we were crossing equipment and where the pipeline was actually going to bore under the highway. We had to set up our signs that said utility work ahead and then flaggers ahead. We had a series of flaggers set up. So it was one flagger who always had his slow sign up, and then one flagger who was actually doing the stopping of the traffic. And to let you guys know, these trucks were coming 65, 70 miles an hour. And again, with the hills and all of that, it was really tough to see. So one of the real emphasis, and this has stuck with me for forever, was, again, setting up that work zone properly so that we could have our signage out to warn drivers that, yes, you were going to need to slow down, and you were eventually probably going to have to stop. Well, that didn't always happen, right? So we put a ton of emphasis on this term, defensive flagging. And, it goes into, on that curve, there were guardrails on either side of the road. So you had to even actually talk about and think about, where do I position myself that is the safest to run this flag if I've got, especially a truck topping this hill going 65 miles an hour and he hasn't seen the signs that warn him that, hey, I'm going to be out here. We were positioning ourselves outside of those pinch points at that point. So we were on the other side of the guardrail with our flag over the guardrail, almost in the roadway so that they could see it. And if, God forbid, the terrible thing happened and they not see us, we had an out, essentially. So that defensive flagging, it's really, I can't tell you, last podcast we talked about distracted driving. This is a serious issue that isn't always talked about on job sites. So if there's any construction-based folks out there who they're not sure about the defensive flagging technique and things of that nature, visit that website that Jim mentioned, call one of us. How can you safely get out of the way? The other one I was going to share with you is, we weren't on a quite as busy road, but I can't tell you, the topography of Ohio, West Virginia is crazy. So you've got switchbacks and all this stuff. And we had our signs set up, and there was a mother who was driving through the work zone that morning. And again, we were practicing defensive flagging. We were on the other side of the guardrail. So, if something would happen, we could get out of the way and be safe. She's late getting the kids to school, and something was going on in the back seat. And actually, one of my coworkers was flagging, and I was helping cross equipment, and we hear this kind of something slap. And we look up, and his sign, his stop sign, is in the road. And then we hear brakes, and she's on the brakes hard, and she finally gets stopped, and there's 4 guys in the middle of the road putting down tires and plywood so we could cross this piece of equipment. And she's sitting there looking at us, and we're looking at her, and it ended okay. Nobody was hurt. We ended up getting some coffee and donuts. She felt so bad, but it honestly gave us an opportunity to kind of tell her a little bit, hey, if you can share with the other people around your community that we're going to be out here for a little bit, give them a heads up to please slow down, because we're just trying to get out of you guys' way as quickly as possible and get traffic flowing as quickly as possible. So to me, defensive flagging, I know it's kind of a funny term, but boy, you talk about a serious thing that you need to be talking to your folks about. And then again, with the changes in signage, just because it says utility work ahead, just because it says pipeline construction ahead, we need to be slowing down and offering those people some relief, because again, they're out there with sometimes nothing to protect them from what could be coming over the hill.
Yeah, that's a pretty good point there. And as I think about a driver maybe approaching that, I may have the opportunity as a driver to prepare those behind me on the highway to do the right thing. So if I'm staying aware and I'm adhering and I'm taking notice of these this flagging and these precautionary posts, prior to the work zone, by me doing the right thing, my brake lights, my speed can have an effect on those and give them a pre-warning, whether or not they're coming in hot and looking for that next hill to pass me on, no matter what. You sharing that story, I had a question pop up in my head, as if any of you guys had ever had to, you heard of somebody in your community or things of that nature that had, been injured or deceased. And instead of asking that question, it reminds me of my now 15-year-old daughter that's out driving. And if you remember maybe a podcast a year ago, I was talking about, for her to get her farm permit, which is also the school permit, we had to go through an Oklahoma state, the state of Oklahoma puts on a work zone. It's about an hour and a half long training that's mandatory for her to be able to get this license. And I took it with her. And the amount of families in Oklahoma, and that's just Oklahoma, that have been affected by being injured or a fatality in their place of work, where they go to every day. We want them to come there, work safe, and be able to return home in the same position. We had some family members come and stay with us. My mother and father-in-law came over, and kind of a blended family situation. But my step brother-in-law, he works over in Wyoming, and he had just been injured working for a construction company within the last 18 months, had a complete shoulder rebuild, and he was on the mend. Well, they placed him as a flagger here lately, and about a month ago, he was struck by a vehicle on the highway in Wyoming. And thank the Lord that he, he was not killed, but he was struck by a vehicle in such a manner that now it completely destroyed the shoulder that he just had fixed and gone through all that, physical therapy. And so just another example of how there's pedestrians that are there, and those orange warning signs, they're that color for a reason. And I encourage the listeners, hey, take part in this National Work Zone Awareness Week. Take advantage of all the different tools and assets that are online, and we'll try to get these plugged into the bottom of this podcast description. And with that, I think that was a pretty good discussion. Kenny, Mike, you guys got any closing thoughts here?
The only thing I wanted to reiterate was a couple things that Barry had said when he was telling those stories. And Barry, appreciate you telling those stories. Was he'd mentioned distraction, which, being in the month of April, this is Distracted Driving Awareness Month as well. But in a work zone, it's even that much more dangerous. And he mentioned that folks coming through work zones being distracted, and he mentioned speed. And those are two things that, and there's a lot of other things that can go into being careful and being safe when you're going through a work zone. But certainly avoiding distractions and getting your speed right are two things that are well within your control, because what we don't want is any reckless behavior when we're driving through these folks' work zones. And that's I wanted to highlight those two things that Barry said, because he wove those into his stories, but there's two very critical areas that we need to touch on. Because what's at stake are the folks that are working there. And Jim, that website that you mentioned, that National Work Zone Awareness Week website, as you were talking, I got on there and I was looking. They actually have a kind of a memorial type tab on there where you can go in and it actually shows highway workers that were killed in their line of work. And it shows their faces on there. And as I'm scrolling through there, I'm seeing people from Arizona, from Virginia, and then obviously me being here in Missouri, that folks from Missouri are sticking out. And, I would just see these names and it's like, it's not just us telling you, hey, we need to slow down because it's, we don't want to dent a fender, or, we don't want to run over some cones or something like that. There are people in these work zones, and it just inches away from your truck or your vehicle that you're driving through there. So we want to stress that, this could quickly become a life or death thing because, as Barry's telling that story, these vehicles popping up over that hill, if they ignored the first orange sign and they ignored their second orange sign, it's real easy to ignore that orange that worker's wearing as well. So pay attention to the staging, pay attention to the signs that they're giving you, slow down, reduce your speed, and certainly don't be distracted when you're entering these work zones because we don't want to be adding any names to that list, that National Work Zone Memorial. We'd love to see no names on that list at all.
And Jim and Mike and Barry, the reason we have this designated week is because of that very thing. People are getting run over in those zones. And like Mike said, when he goes and looks at the actual faces and realize that, that's somebody's husband or wife or mom or dad or son or daughter. And it makes it very, very graphic. But there's a secondary issue to this. And the four of us discussed it a few weeks ago that, when you're talking about a work zone, and the reason this is designated is because there's so many of those around our nation. And there's more so in the summer because there's some of the states that they can't work on their highways until the summer. So, here we are in April and it's coming up before long. You're going to see a lot more of these work zones around the country. But the thing about a work zone is that's a fixed site. You have the warning signs telling you, hey, you're coming to this. And in many states, it'll tell you how long it is. It'll say, work zone next 4 miles or work zone next 3 miles or whatever. But those are there to give you some warning. But we've had a peripheral issue to this that has been engaged by all of the state legislatures across the country as to these what are called move-over laws. And again, I'm making a point here, and it's important not to miss this. A work zone is a fixed site where they have time to put up the signs, put up the warning, have flaggers, and all of that. But there are times there are people's work zone out on the side of the highway that is temporary. It's a record driver picking up a car. It's a crew that's picking up trash on the side of the road. It's a state trooper that has stopped a vehicle on the side of the road. It's a crash that's occurred on the side of the road, and you're entering somebody's work zone. And so the state legislatures have said, we don't always have time like we do with a road contractor to put up signs. So what we'll do is make a state law that if you come up on somebody's work site on the side of the highway, you're required by law to move over. You're required to either slow down or get in a different lane to honor the people that are out there working, doing whatever they're doing, to respect the fact that they're out there doing a job that they need to be doing. And so while we're talking about work zone awareness, I think it's also important to remind, particularly our professional truck drivers, every state in the country now has these what are called move-over laws. So if you're on a multi-lane highway and somebody's working on the shoulder on the side of the road, you're required to move over, give them space, and if you can't, you're required to slow down. And some of the speeds are really low. There's some states you got to get down to 20 or 25 miles an hour before you can pass that person that is in their work zone. And I'll tell y'all real quick, and I'll make this very, very quick, but October of 1989, I was working as a Texas highway patrolman, Interstate 20 at the 532 mile marker on the eastbound side. And I had just written a truck driver a speeding ticket. And I walked back to my patrol car and sat down, and that's the last thing I remember. I got hit from behind by a drunk driver that was at full highway speed, and I was in a Ford Mustang. It completely destroyed that car. They had to use the jaws of life to cut it apart to get me out of it. And it knocked me unconscious. The rear radar unit flew forward and hit me in the back of the head. And when I came to, it blew out every window in that Mustang, the front and back windshield, all the side glass. And when I came to, that truck driver that I had just written a ticket to was leaning into my window. And I opened my eyes, and he's there looking at me, and he said, "Are you all right?" And I looked at him, and I said, "Are you all right?" And he said, "Yeah." He didn't hit me. I said, "What happened?" He said, "You just got hit by a drunk driver." And I said, "Is he all right?" And he said, "Yeah, he's sitting down there on the trunk of his car smoking a cigarette." And that truck driver was just fixing to merge into traffic and was watching his mirror, and he saw it all happen in his mirror. And I tell y'all that story, and here it is 40 years later, and I still have physical damage from that crash. But I was working, and somebody drove a vehicle into my work zone and ran over me. And we didn't have move over laws back then. It wouldn't have helped this guy. He was drunk. I mean, he was legally intoxicated. But the fact is that people, record drivers, police officers, firefighters, the cable TV guy that's out there working on the cable, mowing crews. There's a whole lot more than just road construction people that are out doing their jobs, working in their work zone on the side of our highways. And at the Texas Highway Patrol headquarters in Austin, Texas, we have a picture of every state trooper that's ever been killed in the line of duty. And surprisingly, we've had more that have been run over and killed doing their job on the side of the highway than have been shot and killed through a felony assault. And so the human body just can't stand getting hit by a vehicle. That's all there is to it. And so for our drivers that are listening to us, remember that is some man and some woman's workplace. And it's no different than if you have a desk job and you're sitting there at your desk and cars are whizzing by you 2 feet away from your desk at 70 or 75 miles an hour. That is very unsettling. So let's honor the workplace of these men and women that are out there doing jobs.
I think that's an excellent point to close on. You know, I don't let people come in and disrespect my office place. I don't allow disruptions in the public speaking or to be distracted while I'm conducting facility walkthroughs, things of that nature. So let's respect each other's work zones in where we earn our livelihood. So with that, gentlemen, thank you so much for a good conversation today about this National Work Zone Week and sharing your examples and life lessons there. Join us next time. We look forward to speaking with you again. And for us, the Driving the Line team, thank you. And we will talk with you again soon.
That's all the time we have for this edition of Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety. We hope you enjoyed our discussion, and thank you for listening. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Driving the Line, the pursuit of safety on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or any other app you're using. You can also follow Marsh McLennan Agency on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. Until the next time, thanks again for listening. Drive safely, everyone.